Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the crucible of democracy. My name is Bill Shaw, and I'm the publisher and general manager of the Issaquah-Sammamish Reporter and our sister papers throughout the East Side. The Issaquah-Sammamish Reporter is pleased and honored and proud to host this candidate forum this evening. I also like to, so thank you all for coming, and a big thank you to the City of Sammamish for providing the venue and the technical staff for tonight's forum. We really, really appreciate it. And I'm so grateful that all of you have a passionate interest in our city and in enriching the place that we live. And I also would like to thank the candidates for stepping up and offering their all to be a part of this community and to make it a better place for all of us. And I'm appreciative and grateful for everything that you're doing. So thank you. And I'd also want to introduce our reporter staff that are in attendance, including my partner in crime and my regional editor, Carrie Rodriguez. And our staff writer for Sammamish, Megan Campbell. And inbound, due to traffic issues, my staff writer for Issaquah, Miss Nicole Jennings, and she will be our timekeeper as well. So. In addition, I would like to say again, I didn't get it. Say again? I missed it. In addition, I also want to recognize our editorial board members, some of whom are here tonight. And if you're here, please stand when I call your name. Mr. Fred Nystrom, Mr. Larry Crandall. Thank you for coming. And we have Don Jacobson, and Dale Williams, and Bernadette Ann. So they are our editorial board. And our mission at the Issaquah-Sammamish Reporter is to provide a fair and balanced venue that will help you hear from our candidates, not only about the important issues of the day and how they'll deal with them, but to understand the personal ethos of each candidate and to hopefully get to the core of why they want to serve the community. And thank you again, candidates. We know this is a busy time for you all, and we appreciate you joining us here tonight. Carrie, I'll turn over the helm to you.
Okay, great. To summarize this evening's process as a moderator of this forum, so we've reached out to community members for the past couple of weeks, and we've solicited a bunch of questions. And thank you all to the residents and voters who participated and sent in questions to the reporter. The candidates have all been briefed on today's format. However, the specific questions that we'll be asking, we have not shared with the candidates in advance. We will start by providing each candidate an opportunity to introduce themselves in a 90-second statement. I will then ask a series of questions on the important topics of the day. And to be fair, we're going to rotate equally so that each candidate can be the first to start on any given topic. Our candidates will have 1 minute each for each answers, and my colleague in the front of the room, she will raise a yellow card to indicate when candidates have 30 seconds left, and a red card when their time is up. We will be sticklers in an effort to get the answers to a variety of questions in this tight time frame. I'm a mother of 5, and so if I have to use my mother voice to cut candidates off, I am prepared to do so. We will also take questions, a few questions from the audience later on this evening. At the end of the forum, each candidate will have 30 seconds for closing statements. Candidates, during the Q&A, if you feel like you haven't had enough time for an answer on a given topic, you are encouraged to use all or part of your closing statement to finish your point or position. Okay, let's get started with the opening statements. And just a reminder to all candidates to please speak loudly and clearly into your microphone. And let's begin with Meenal.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Minal Gosamieh. I'm a mom, I'm an attorney, and I'm a lifelong community organizer. I got my bachelor's from the University of Washington School of Business and my Juris Doctorate from Gonzaga University School of Law. I'm also board chair of an agency called API Chaya, and we provide services and education to survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking. And I'm deeply, deeply involved in the anti-violence movement because I myself am a survivor of domestic violence. I'm in this race not only because I feel like I'm qualified, I'm in this race because I love Sammamish. My family loves Sammamish, my kids love Sammamish, and I just really want to, and I'm committed to serving this community and making sure it's a great place for my kids and my neighbors and my family. Our community strength, in my opinion, is our diversity, and I really want to leverage that diversity of profession, diversity of culture, diversity of all of us from all walks of life, and I feel I am a great candidate to engage with those folks and making sure our city policies are serving our entire community. So if you like what you hear tonight, I would really appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Karen Howe.
Good evening, and thank you for being here. I'd also like to thank the City Council for the work that they've already done, because it wasn't until I jumped into this race that I understood the hours and the research and all the effort the Council puts forward actually on our behalf, and the city staff as well. So I would just like to publicly acknowledge that. Right now, I think we might all look very much alike to you or sound very much alike. We're all talking about traffic and growth and trees and fiscal responsibility. So what sets us apart? I mean, I could tell you that I've been a CEO, that I've managed multi-million-dollar budgets, which I have. I've been a community volunteer for 25 years and on the PTSA board and on and on. Or I could say what sets me apart potentially is the way that I look at the world right now. About 2 years ago, I had a significant health scare. It was life-changing. And so I have to say that I look at the world differently now. I don't waste time. I move ahead on projects. I know what a priority is and what a priority isn't. So just to finish up, I'll tell you that I've become more collegiate in what I do. I've become inclusive. I listen, I'm data-driven, and I'm creative. I don't have all the answers for the city, but I actually think that you might. And what I'm extraordinarily good at is helping to connect those ideas and building a coalition to get things done.
Karen Moran.
Hi, I'm Karen Moran, and I'm also running for basically the same reasons. We incorporated 30 years ago, and I was involved highly in that process. And then since then have been involved in the community from the time we incorporated. I sat on the Washington State Boundary Review Board. I was on the King County Women's Advisory Board, the King County East Side Metro. I then became, and I am to many of you, a water commissioner currently. And then when we became a city, I became involved in being on the Planning Advisory Board, being on the Planning Commission, the Parks Board, and many other small things on top of the fact that I'm a business owner and raised 3 kids in our community. The things that we're looking at of roads have been an issue since we incorporated. We need to do something about it now. We are gridlocked. And the guessing game is done. We're behind. You can hear your own council members telling you we're behind in the roads. So that matched with the fact that we have financial things that we need to put in order. We are going to be hitting a crossover point in 3 years. That's important to me. That means it's something we need to address now. It is not something that we can just kick the can down the road. So I'd like to take all of my experience that I've learned from being your water commissioner and being involved in all those committees, and I'd like to take that to the council and represent you, and I hope you vote for me.
Rika?
Thank you, and thank you to City Hall for hosting this event. It's great to see everyone out here tonight. My name is Rika Hushengi, and I was born and raised in Redmond, and I'm running to make sure Sammamish remains the best place on earth to raise a family. Our entire region is in the midst of unprecedented growth, as I'm sure you guys might have noticed. That growth is creating a cascading set of challenges and opportunities for the city that we love. Too often it forces our government to simply react as each issue and each decision is debated and decided largely on its own, but they're all interconnected. Decisions on growth impact our city revenue, our trees, our traffic. Instead of backing into a future accidentally, we must bring our community together around a vision for Sammamish, a vision that preserves what makes the city so special and creates goals for making it better, a vision that can become the basis for conscious decision making. For me, that vision includes keeping Sammamish the best place on earth to raise a family, preserving the natural splendor of our environment, maintaining the safety of our community, embracing and celebrating our diversity and inclusiveness, and building real regional solutions to our traffic nightmare. No one's in this race is better positioned to bring the community and our regional partners together around real solutions. I've served as an attorney and diplomat for the U.S. Department of State. I'm a trained mediator. I've even served as a policy advisor in the U.S. Senate. I've dedicated my entire career to bringing people together around common goals to solve tough problems. Thank you.
Rituja?
Good evening, and thank you for being here tonight. My name is Rituja Indapure, and I'm running for position number 5. Over 15 years ago, my husband and I decided to move to Sammamish to raise our family. We came here for the great schools, the parks and open spaces, and the safe and diverse neighborhoods. And since I've come to Sammamish, I've always been part of the community, be it on a PTSA board, a Girl Scout mom, a soccer coach, or as a director on nonprofit boards. Today, I'm running for the Sammamish City Council because I want to give back to the community that has given my family so much. I've engaged with you over years and months, and I share your concerns about the environment, the growth, and our infrastructure. As a tech industry professional, a mom, and a community leader, I have the experience to work together and see results. I will work with our regional partners to find a traffic solution that benefits us all. I will ask the hard questions necessary to ensure that we're investing into the future of our community. And I will make sure that we have transparency at all levels and all voices are heard. Now more than ever, it's time to do what's right for Sammamish. Again, my name is Rituja Indapure, and I'm running for position 5, and I'd like to earn your vote. Thank you.
Chris?
Hi, my name's Chris Ross, and I'm running for position 5 as well. And I was born in Bellevue, Washington, 55 years ago. I've been in the East Side communities for that entire time. Only a short period of time I helped Chicago, relocate to Chicago, Boeing, and then I came right back. When I came back in 2010, 7 years ago, I've been in Sammamish. I've been actively involved in different endeavors here in the community. I'm currently a board member of the Kiwanis of Sammamish. And what's most important to me right now is the changing dynamic. And this is really what caused me to come forward for the council, and that is our financial condition. Like my corporation, over the last 30 years, I've been looking at budgets. And what I do within the Boeing company is look at new locations, new ventures, and anytime you have a startup like a new city, 1999, where we incorporated, you have a growth mode. You have a rapid growth mode, and you're shifting from our growth to a sustaining mode, which we have now. Now that we have the crossover point where revenues are less than our expenditures, we have a transportation improvement plan that's ballooning. We have to figure out how to manage that, because fiscal responsibility is not about letting the community decline. Fiscal responsibility is being a strong steward of your tax money and putting it to best use so that we can sustain and improve Sammamish going forward. Thank you.
Melanie?
Thank you and good evening. The people of Sammamish have to make a tough choice. There are great candidates up here, 9 of us. Like many of us, I believe we need to manage our development, protect our natural environment, and address our traffic issues. I share the values and priorities of this community, but I have a unique experience that no other candidate has. And I think that's one that will ensure that we get results for all families, particularly those who don't get a seat at the table that often. I'm a single mom to 2 boys I adopted and raised on my own here in Sammamish. I know what it's like to have to do things by myself and sometimes struggle to make ends meet. There have been a few times I thought I might have to leave and move to a less expensive area, but I fought really hard to stay here because I wanted stability for my boys. Because of this, I am deeply, deeply committed to helping all families thrive in this community. As a technology management consultant for 30 years, I've led programs and projects at over 100 companies. Over the course of my career, I've learned how to lead global teams, collaborate across cultures, countries, and competing interests, and most important, to listen. My determination has ensured the success of my family and my clients. This, along with my commitment to the community, are the qualities that I will bring to the City Council. I will always be honest and direct and will answer only to the residents of Sammamish. Thank you.
John?
Thank you, John Robinson. I've been traveling around the city, and one of the first questions I'm given is, why am I running for City Council? For me, the answer is really quite simple. I believe I have a moral obligation to repay our city. My wife Daphne and I have been truly blessed, like many of you, to raise our families over the last 29 years in Sammamish, and our love for the area grows deep. And it's proven to be a wonderful environment for our family and a life full of opportunities. Recently, I had the opportunity to retire, and now I have the time, the passion, the focus to be able to repay the debt of gratitude to our community. Some believe that our city council positions are part-time jobs, but the hard reality is that they require a full-time attention of the individual serving. We are a growing, dynamic city requiring bold solutions to the complex issues that we're hearing about today: planning of our road network, transit, infrastructure, etc., and enhancing our unique community character while preserving and protecting our precious environment for our children and grandchildren, all the while being fiscally conservative. There's no question these are complex issues facing us. For the last 35 years, my career was in the healthcare industry as a director, manager, and entrepreneur, solving complex issues and getting results. My goal is to take these lessons.
Time's up. Thank you. Pam?
Thank you. I'm Pam Stewart, and I'm so excited and honored to be here, and I'm so glad all of you are here too. I fell in love with Sammamish, and I want to put my education, my skills, and my experiences to use for our community. I have a degree in mechanical engineering with concentration in economics, and I have 25 years of professional experience, currently in customer advocacy. So you see, I really do love representing people and collaborating across diverse groups with competing agendas to deliver results. I've been involved in the community from PTA president to basketball coach, even the chief umpire on Eastlake Little League board, which I think sets me up well for politics. And I recently earned black belts in Arnis and Taekwondo, and I teach with my children right here in Sammamish. However, in knocking on almost 2,000 doors over the last couple of months, I know that, like me, the community is concerned about growth, the traffic, and the trees. And we're in danger of losing what makes Sammamish so special. We cannot ignore these concerns. We need to address them with pragmatic solutions. We need sustainable growth management plan, balancing infrastructure projects and the environment with the development, and a plan that paces growth with what the infrastructure can handle, and nothing more. I am passionate, energetic, and pragmatic, and my husband will tell you that I'm cheap, but I'm not. I'm fiscally smart. I'm responsible with our resources, but I will push hard to ensure that we invest in our community when and where we need it. Thank you. I'm Pam Stewart.
Okay, now for the fun. Now we're going to get into the big topics. Candidates, as you start each segment of questions, please let me know if you need me to repeat the question, and I'm happy to do so. We're going to start with Karen Howe on the first question. What is your plan for reducing car traffic in Sammamish?
Is that a problem? So, my plan for reducing traffic, it's multi-stage. First off, the first thing we do is we get parents out of cars. Let's get the walking school bus going. Let's get kids walking with each other to school, walking each other to school. Get them out of, get the parents out of the cars. Get the kids walking. Get the kids actually getting some exercise. That's number one. Number two, let's get the shuttle bus going. So that's just a quick route around, right? So it goes field, library, shopping center, field, library, shopping center. So if you get a shuttle going, now you're relieving traffic on an ongoing basis, and it's for everybody, right? It's for residents, it's for young, old, people without cars. That gets people, again, moving And the other, of course, is the longer-term piece, which is transit. Transit is the ultimate solution. That is the best people mover that we are going to have. So it's bringing more transit options to the plateau.
Karen Moran.
Well, traffic is a huge problem and has been for many years. As Karen pointed out, the intercity shuttle is a great idea, and I believe there's a group that's currently even looking into that and working with Metro. We also need to work with our larger businesses, particularly Amazon, Microsoft, Boeing, and perhaps work with them on more ride shares so that we can reduce the number of cars on the road. And then the other thing we have to do is we need to actively participate in having things available so people know what's available, know where the buses are, work with Metro. We need more routes. They take our routes away. We need to be actively working with Issaquah, working with Redmond. We need to improve our roads. If we don't do something with our roads, then it doesn't matter what we do with our traffic. We're still going to be stuck. So we need to work with surrounding communities to make sure that we can get the traffic flowing.
Rika?
Well, it's not an easy, there are no easy solutions to reducing people in cars. I know if anyone is like me, you like the comfort of your car and, you know, as opposed to sitting in a bus, waiting for a bus. But there are things that we can do. For example, we're increasing all our home businesses. We should have a spot on the plateau that allows people to come together and work on the plateau. For example, my husband goes to one of those in Redmond. Why don't we have one of those in Sammamish? That right there is one person who'd be closer to home. We need to work with our partners, Issaquah and Redmond. I think that is the most critical thing that we can do as a city and that we haven't focused on. We're not going to solve our problems all by ourselves. We really need to make partnerships with our neighboring cities, Issaquah and Redmond. I can't emphasize that enough, whether that be bringing more Metro transit into our area or coming up with even more creative solutions.
Ratuja?
Thank you. So over the 15 years that I've been here, I've definitely seen my share of increase in traffic. I agree with the solution that we need to have a loop bus within Sammamish, which I think Metro is working on, because when I've knocked on doors and talked to seniors or even moms who would just like to send their kids to the Y and, you know, they don't want to get into their car. So they have really appreciated this idea of having a loop bus, which would take people from all the way to Klahani to the shopping centers here. The other thing that I would like to do is to increase the connectivity between our streets. If we have trails which connect from one neighborhood to another and which make them either walkable or bikeable, I think that is going to help our communities a lot.
Chris?
Only 3% of our citizens actually work in the Sammamish area. So what's happening? Everybody's exiting Sammamish and entering Sammamish. Circulating within Sammamish is not going to help us dramatically. It'd be nice. It'd be a good amenity. What I'm most concerned about is trying to have a telecommuting program, more people telecommuting, encouraging employers to do it on an alternate basis, not 5 days a week. If Microsoft telecommuted Monday and Tuesday, another employer may be Wednesday and Thursday. So try to coordinate with our major employers ways to telecommute and reduce the amount of people getting in and out of Sammamish would be a good effort to start.
Melanie?
Thank you. Well, I'm from Los Angeles, so I can really appreciate a good traffic jam. And I've sat in them in the mornings on my way to work. So I like many of the ideas we've already talked about, the loop shuttle, things like that. The roads take a long time to build. They impact everyone for a very long time and, of course, cost a lot of money. So I like the idea of let's look at shorter-term solutions. The shuttle, the telecommuting is another option. One person suggested to me building pull-out lanes for the buses so that on two-lane roads, the buses stopping don't get in the way. They pull out and people can go by. So I think there are some shorter-term solutions that we can look at to help relieve some of the traffic issues we're having today.
John?
As we're moving from a rural to a more urban society here, there really is what we call a scheduling problem. Everybody tries to leave in the morning and come back in the evening. I feel that if we partner with our major companies, we can get them to incentivize so it's not a single person in a single car. That's what really is causing gridlock. So I would advocate with the Microsofts of the world and the Amazons of the world to use their knowledge and their skill to incentivize their employees to help schedule and come together and ride share. But we do need to improve our roads because we are moving from a rural to a more urban society. So things can be done like that. Long term, we're going to have to embrace technology in 10 or 15 years here. There's going to be exciting things happening, and we need to embrace that technology.
Pam?
Well, none of us want to spend any more time in traffic. We all have places to be, and we want to spend time with our families. But I do think that we have to do short, mid, and long-term projects. We have to increase the capacity of the roads. We have to figure out a plan for it. It's inevitable. And just like we talked about, if you have buses and you only have 2-lane roads, you're not really getting there any faster. And we aren't going to bus our way out of this. And as a Microsoft employee, I can tell you that I think trying to coordinate everyone's schedules at a company around a city's traffic problems is probably not going to be the answer. But technology partners are part of the answer. We have technology partners here where we can build platforms and apps where we can connect people with what I call on-demand and point-to-point ride sharing. Because we have a last-mile issue. Even if we get more buses, how do we get to that bus? And that is where an intra-city trolley will help, and some of this point-to-point. And that's part of the long-term solution, too, where we can have ride-share services.
Mino?
Improving the roads for sure, and not just in the short term, because if we make those improvements today, then that's going to benefit, decades and decades to come. So not just our kids, but our grandkids and their grandkids, and that's how I like to plan things in the long term. I really like the idea that my friends up here have been talking about making the city more walkable. Let's improve the sidewalks while we're improving the roads. Let's finish off some of the trails so we're connecting streets. When I grew up on the east side, I was on the Burke-Gilman Trail all the time. That's how I got to whether it was school or just Baskin-Robbins, and I would love to have that for my children too. So make the trails safe and make them accessible. And of course, working with regional partners to increase transit is definitely a priority. And then I love the inner city connector idea that we've been talking about. Thank you.
Okay, for the next question, we're going to start with Karen Moran. What is your What is your view of the way Sammamish is measuring traffic and applying the Growth Management Act's concurrency requirement?
Oh, this is a fun one. Okay, well, I was chair of the traffic committee when we were on the planning advisory board. And so the way that the traffic is for concurrency, the way that it's calculated right now, I don't believe it is in what is supposed to be the message from the Growth Management Board. I do not believe it's correct. I believe that since we wrote the first comp plan, that it has been watered down repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly by each council. What has happened is we have gone from segment averaging, which has watered it down, and we've done some other, the council has repeatedly, as they've done the segment averaging, they've lowered level of service on roads. And I've watched things sit on our TIP for years. So I do not believe the city is in tune with what is meant from the Growth Management Act. I would like to look into that further, and I think that we should look at the concurrency further.
Rika?
You know what has been troubling to me is I've gotten so much information from citizens who are actually looking closely into this, like Mickey Mueller, more than the actual council and the city. I think it's because of work of our citizens that we're hearing more and more about the GMA and concurrency and bringing up issues to light. And there's certain things that aren't right. We have the Growth Management Act, but we need to do what's best for our city as well. Right now, we've got to prioritize the programs and the projects that we have. We need to look at our funding, and we really need to make a conscious decision of what is going to be best for our city right now. It's just like using our own finances in our households. We really need to prioritize what we are doing for our city and our growth.
Rituja?
So continuing on the traffic, I think the city has put out reports, and last couple of weeks there were a lot of discussions on concurrency and how it's measured. And I agree, it's very complicated. I think we really need to reach out to our citizens and ask what their priorities are. As Karen mentioned, there have been projects sitting on the TIP for a long time. I have parents come and tell me that their kids can't walk to Sunny Hills because there's no sidewalk. I see people from the retirement homes walking on 228 on the side of the road, and that is not right. So we really need to listen to our community. We need to prioritize our projects and make sure we're doing something for the benefit of our whole community.
Chris?
Nothing stops us from investing more than is required by concurrency. Concurrency enables us to get funds from the developers, and those are the projects that talked about watered down. Well, if you increase the standard too high, then we'd be required to spend money as well. So we got to find the right balance and the right amount of concurrency standards. It's a policy decision the council can implement. I think it needs to be stronger. I also think there needs to be subjective evaluations of concurrency other than just the pure numbers, because we're a different community than other communities. So it doesn't, one size does not fit all.
Melanie?
Thank you. Well, we have policies that were put in place in the early 2000s around this, and I think that the conversation that has been going on in the community right now is a very good one, and it's probably time that we look at these policies again. It's a good juncture. It appears that all of our roads pass concurrency, but we know that's not true as we're stuck on Sahalee Way in the morning, right? One of the things that I learned over the last few weeks on this was that there is a requirement around infrastructure concurrent with development, and that infrastructure, or that threshold, is 6 years. Well, 6 years of a 300-home development putting cars on 228, that's a long time to wait to have to sit in traffic. So I think that there are many pieces of this that we need to look at across the board and start to make decisions that make more sense for the community. Thank you.
John?
The issue of concurrency hits the heart of transparency and accountability in our local government here. City council is responsible to the citizens, and city manager and staff is responsible to city council. So the process of concurrency, and I applaud City Hall for being transparent about a week and a half ago, in which they presented a very detailed and complex calculation of how things are done. This was very enlightening. My takeaway from this is that calculations need to come up to date. They need to be transparent to all citizens, and City Council needs to be strong. Because City Council is the one that sets the levels of service for concurrency.
Pam?
Well, I'd love to go into concurrency because there's a lot of math, and I just love the math. But I only have a minute, so I think, though, we've heard from all of you again, almost 2,000 homes that I've gone to, and traffic is absolutely the #1 issue. Concurrency is complicated. It is a balancing act in terms of making sure that we have the right infrastructure in place, but that we don't box ourselves into something where we have to take on so many infrastructure projects that we shut down our own road system. So there are some complexities. But level of service, we've heard from you, is not acceptable as it is today. It's been deteriorating because we have more people and we don't have more roads. We haven't added a single lane of capacity into or out of the city yet. So the council sets level of service, and I think we need to dig into that math, and we need people who know how to dig into that math, and we need to find the right level of service that works for our community and that will balance our infrastructure needs.
Mino?
Now that the issue of concurrency has been raised, I think that we can have a more collaborative discussion. There have obviously some information has fallen through the cracks, so let's review the data, the current state of affairs. Let's review capacity and what needs to be done and plan accordingly. I hate to just spiral in a negative way, but I think that every decision can be corrected and revised and brought up to speed so that we're better serving our 62,000 residents. Thank you.
Karen?
Level of service is the critical piece, and what I would like to see is to have the citizenry involved in what that level of service actually should be. And what that means is, what are you prepared to put up with? For example, are you prepared to have streets that are faster for you to plow through. However, it's harder for people who have mobility issues to cross the street. So it's a balance. It's getting that agreement internally so that let's know what we want. Let's agree what we're going to measure, because data is just data. And we just we accurately pinpoint exactly what we want to measure. So let's measure AM as well as PM, for example, for traffic, so that we get better data into our system to develop a better plan forward.
Okay, next question. We're going to start with Rika. What is the city's role in providing a spectrum of housing to those in all income ranges, and what would you do to provide this housing in Sammamish?
Thank you. You know, I think we're definitely at a crossroads in our housing here in Sammamish. I think in the last couple years, our housing prices have gone up 10%. We're looking at an average home going for about $1 million. This is boxing out a lot of young families who want to come to Sammamish for the same reasons why we came to this family, to raise their kids, for the schools, for the beautiful community here. Other issues that I think have really come up as I'm meeting with citizens in Sammamish is our seniors. I met with a gentleman who was telling me that his house is paid off, but his property taxes are so high that he might have to sell his home. That's unacceptable. We need to do better, and we need to take care of our seniors, and we need to come up with a plan that allows younger families to enter into our community, just like most of us did.
Ratuja?
Okay, thank you. So I come from Klahani, which has standalone homes, which has apartments, condos, and we also have 3 high schools here. And when I've door knocked and I've met teachers, first of all, they've unfortunately all been living in apartments, and they cannot afford to live here in Sammamish. And that is just not right. We need to be a city for all economies and for all people. And I would strongly urge that we have policy going forward which we incentivize our developers to have some units left for affordable housing and to have density in housing as well.
Chris?
Affordable housing is measured in terms of median income from a conventional sense, and that being we have a very high median income in Sammamish does not provide any housing that is, quote, affordable. Some of the things we're doing, Habitat for Humanity, Regional Coalition of Housing, are good programs, but I think it was also mentioned the senior population. I talked to many seniors who have bought their homes many years ago for $300,000, 3 acres or more, and now they're paying property tax on $1 million plus homes and the excess property. So with that, I'd like to see helping our seniors stay in Sammamish and perhaps put some of that excess property on the land acquisition strategy. So preserve it for the environment and help more seniors stay in the community.
Melanie?
Thank you. I'd like to see us have a mix of housing alternatives. Our neighborhoods, the new neighborhoods that get built, all the houses seem to be, you know, huge houses, McMansions, if you will. I'd like to see us have more of a mix, smaller houses, some level of increased density perhaps, more sustainable development communities. There's a community on Bainbridge called Grow that's similar to that, with community gardens, things like that. So I'd like to see us have a mix of those different kinds of housing. This also goes to the upzoning question, which would create higher density in neighborhoods, but would allow people with large lots to build condos or build a townhouse on that lot, and would allow more people with more modest incomes to live here. So I'd like to see us have a combination of those things, and then discuss that upzoning and how that would impact our housing issues. Thank you.
John?
As a society and a community, we have a moral obligation to take care of all segments of our population. So I propose that we partner with private industry to achieve this type of thing. In the town center, we have multi-use family units going in. Certainly 10% should be set aside for the affordable. And in defining affordable, that's the difficulty because of the pricing that we have here in Sammamish. We don't want to drive people out of Sammamish because of property taxes. Some cities and some states are finding it within their budget to be able to alleviate some of the property taxes for our senior citizens, and that would be something I'd really like to explore also.
Pam?
Sure, thank you. We're in danger of missing out on an entire generation of children because young couples can't afford to move to Sammamish. And it's true that we do have folks who've lived here for 30 or 40 years, and they're struggling to pay their property taxes. We need a few things. We need diversity in housing. We do need smaller homes. We need more rental property. But we also need to look into philanthropic investors. And I say that because even if you want smaller homes or higher density, the property alone in Sammamish is just too expensive, and realistically that doesn't create affordability. And there are programs all across the country for this, and I think we need to reach out and try to help with that here. And there are also programs being discussed at the state level for property tax rebate programs for people on fixed incomes below a certain level. And I think we need to look at that for our seniors. But I think there are options. We just have to really put the time in and get some staff dedicated to doing that.
Mino?
We should certainly provide housing for our diverse community, which includes the seniors who maybe want to downsize their large homes and live in smaller townhomes or apartments. We should certainly provide for young couples to come here, because at the end of the day, this is a great city, and we want to, if you want to live here and you want to raise your children here, you should be able to do so, just like we all are doing. So yeah, I'd really like to work with builders and making sure that there is capacity to have anyone who wants to live here, work here, be able to do so in the town center at higher densities or condos or any mix of housing that works for the larger population. Thank you.
Karen, how?
So density is important. It really does help with creating a vibrant and dynamic downtown, which is a vision I think that we have for the city, is to have some place, a gathering place where we all want to go to. I have a copy of the Arch Parity Report that actually tells us exactly where we fall in a lineup in terms of what we give in terms of partnerships for affordable housing vis-a-vis our regional partners such as Bellevue or Mercer Island. We actually don't do too bad. We give about 10% in, and I'd like to see us increase that amount up to the $196,000 level, which is the recommended donation that Arch has targeted for us and of our community of our size and of our capacity. By doing so, we would grow our affordable housing and potentially some subsidized housing as well, which I think is also important.
Karen?
Affordable housing is something that we need to address because I think Sammamish falls pretty far behind on it. And after raising 3 kids and watching them all struggle currently to try to buy houses in our region, it's something we need to address. I think that the city's doing a great job. It's currently building with the Habitat for Humanity, and they've already addressed a certain percentage of housing going into town center that will be affordable housing, and I think we could look at that and see if that is an adequate amount or is it something that we need to do more with. I think private industry is something that we ought to partner with. And at the end of the day, we need to remember that we've got to keep our teachers and our young kids and firemen and people that work in our community should be living in our community, not having to come from someplace else. And it's easier to answer the last question.
Good. For the next question, we're going to begin with Ratuja. What 3 actions should the city take to increase its tree canopy cover?
Thank you. The environment and trees are very important to the citizens of Sammamish, and I really want all of us to be good stewards of the land. The 3 proposals that I would have to maintain our tree canopy is, first of all, ensuring that we have species diversity amongst our trees, so that the current trees that we have, if one gets a disease, all are not diseased. Encouraging our private homeowners, institutions, and homeowners to plant more trees. That is something that I would do. And then thirdly, partner with other organizations and communities in maintaining tree structures and educating them about the importance of trees. I think these are the 3 things that I would do to increase our tree canopy.
Chris?
Well, the first thing I would do is consider more strategic development. Consider transfer development rights, for example. Many areas have high density of trees that are being chopped down for development. Perhaps allow upzoning in exchange for preserving those trees. That's one significant strategy. Number two is have strategic tree plantings. Many communities look at ways to increase the tree canopy by adding trees in strategic areas. And finally is looking at the health of trees. We got root rot and all that, those diseases that we're having with our trees. We're losing our trees. We're losing them. So let's keep them healthy, and let's work on trying to find ways to preserve what we have as well.
Melanie?
Thank you. One of the things that the city is looking at is the Urban Forest Plan, which is part of the U.S. Forest Service. So I think that that's a great program, and I look forward to hearing more about what that is, what that will bring to us. But that looks at different, looks at city forests across multiple modalities, including planning, environmental health, and so on. So I look forward to hearing more about that and learning more about that. I think that's going to be an important thing for us to do. I also think we need to look at development and the clear cutting of lots and how we do that, how we allow that, and making sure that we're holding developers accountable. And then we need to, if anything, preserve our rare trees. So if there, we need to put some policies in place around making sure that when trees are coming down, we're definitely not cutting down the rare trees. Thank you.
John?
Thank you. You're now talking a language I understand quite well. My degree is in science, and the tree canopy is just one part of a living organism we call our environment. And so it's completely interrelated and interdependent upon the streams, the rivers, everything that we take as our environment. So what would I do? Well, certainly we have to protect and preserve our environment in all aspects of it, not only just the trees, but our rivers and lakes, etc. City Council is the one who sets the rules for developers, such as how many trees, what percentage can be retained. So we need to have a strong, City Council who will enforce these rules, or set the rules to be enforced. And it's a living organism, our environment, so it's not just the trees. We've got to protect all of it.
Pam?
Thank you. There is a tree, well, the urban forestry study that is going to be kicking off, and I think it's going to be really important that as the council, we take that data that we get and we make sure that we're ready to act on that. Because we can have ideas, and that's great, but we really need to rely on the experts and the data. That being said, I do have some ideas. We have a very strict tree retention policy, and that's great. I think we can help improve that a number of ways. One is to make sure that we have clusters of trees, not just a strict number or percentage of trees, that we make sure that we require more of the mature trees. Our older neighborhoods sometimes are more beautiful because we have more of the mature trees. And finally, when we require the replacement of trees by the developers, they need to be appropriate. Too many homeowners right now have to take down the trees because we have some giant tree that was planted 15 years ago that was a little twig, and now it's encroaching on our foundations. So we need to make sure they're appropriate. Thanks.
Meenal?
Preserving our trees is certainly on everyone's radar, and everyone wants to do what they can to save our trees. So I really like the idea of staffing a professional to guide our efforts, an arborist, some environmentalists. I also like the idea of forming a task force. I feel like there's enough people who have a good eye on what's happening around us. So maybe creating a task force to monitor what's happening around the city, and also policy compliance, making sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing according to the future urban forestry plan. And then also just educating ourselves at the city level, and then our residents on what the urban forestry plan should look like, and make sure everybody has input in on that. And then just generally how to keep our city as green as possible. Thank you.
Karen, how?
So beyond the forestry plan, what else could you consider? Well, you could consider setting a goal for yourself to become a tree city. So a tree city is a city that has agreed to have an arborist that's actually on staff that cares for the trees and for the urban forest. It requires a certain level of investment to help pay and to maintain that forest. It's actually creating a board level type policy so that you have specific outcomes that you want for this forest. And it's a declaration that you do in partnership with the Arbor Day organization. So what I'm thinking is that let's set our sights higher. Let's think about how we could become a tree city. There are other cities that have managed to attain this. It's not easy, but I think it's aspirational, and I think it's something worth striving for.
Karen?
Well, I think the first step is to see the information that comes back from the urban forestry plan. And then also tree cities. Tree cities are something that I had looked into as well. And we look at San Diego, and you can look at Portland, and those are two cities that right off the top are currently working at that and trying to attain their standards of being tree cities. But if the first thing we need to do is we need to stop the clear cutting, because sometimes I come down 228th and think the only tree that's going to be left is what's on the water tower. We need to stop the clear cutting. We need to make sure that trees are left where they should be left. We don't want a single or two trees left someplace. They need to be clumped, so when we do get our windstorms, they're not taken out along with something else. And on top of that, we need to also be careful that we don't start stomping on people's personal property rights as far as trees go. I can tell you personally, I'm having a problem taking down a dead tree. So we need to make sure that we're fair to property owners.
Rika?
Our trees, our forests are a defining aspect of our city. I think most of you will agree. We need to hold ourselves and others accountable when it comes to preserving our trees. We need to set the city's priorities for management, protection, and promotion of our trees, first off. I think we need to look at the developments that are going in and keep people accountable in these developments. Too much of this old growth is being taken down when we supposedly have rules that prevent that. I think we also do need an arborist on staff at the city to help us preserve the old trees that we do have in our city and the ones that are unfortunately getting diseased.
Okay, next question. We're going to start with Chris. Do you support a plastic bag and styrofoam ban in Sammamish? Why or why not?
I support 100% recyclable bags in stores. I also want to make sure that we make it easy for the shoppers to recycle at the stores themselves, so have recycling bins at the store. The reason an all-out ban is not practical is people will start shopping at Costco and buying bulk bags for their liners in their homes, and then we'll end up using more plastic, non-recyclable, and so it would further the problem. So I think there's a balance. Go fully recyclable.
Melanie?
Thank you. I'm the person who goes to Issaquah, forgets that I'm in Issaquah, and leaves my bags in the car. So I agree with Chris that we need to make it easy. If we put a ban in place here in Sammamish, that we would need to make it easy for people to communicate more with people and make it easy for them to bring alternatives to the plastic bags and make it easier for them to recycle as well. But I would be in favor of that, and I think it would be interesting to look at what other cities have done and some innovative ways that they've brought people into the conversation around it and made it easy for people to do.
John?
I support a plastic bag ban and also styrofoam, and I look at Issaquah because they have put this in place and they're altering the pattern of the people's behavior. And so I'd like to take it further, though. I'd like us to partner more with our schools, because on a daily basis, the amount of waste that comes out of a school, it is not recycled, and that's an opportunity for us to make that a benefit for our society also.
Pam?
Yeah, thank you. I do support a ban, and I support a ban because we have an obligation to leave this planet in the same, if not better shape than we found it in. The Boy Scouts tell you, do no harm. And right now, plastic and styrofoam are harmful. And we have viable environmentally friendly alternatives for these. What I don't support is requiring businesses to charge their customers for the paper bags. Businesses already account for the cost of bags in what we buy, so I think we can have the ban and not create an extra burden and an extra procedure and process and something we have to try to enforce, and allow people to find those alternatives. But if we're not careful, we're going to have plastic bags, styrofoam, Twinkies, and cockroaches, and that's all that's going to be left.
Mino?
I absolutely support a ban on both plastic bags and styrofoam. We are an environmentally, sound city, and I think that goes hand in hand with something like this. I don't see the downside. I think it's a matter of just changing and evolving, and I think we'll all get there and remember to grab our bags before we pop into Trader Joe's or whatever. There's a lot of times that I've forgotten my bags. It's an easy walk to get back to your car, grab your reusable bag, and get your groceries and be on your way. I don't see a downside at all. Thank you.
Karen, how?
I support a ban on plastic and styrofoam bags. We all know that it takes about 2 weeks to about 30 days to actually create a new behavior. And our kids have actually done a pretty good job of recycling things at schools. That's what I found. So maybe we could, take a page out of their notebook for a second and just pay attention to what they're doing. They're actually pretty good at it. So in my view, we'd go ahead with a ban. I actually would be interested potentially, if we don't do the ban, to charge a little extra for that bag to kind of help with that carrot stick approach, and use that money then to help fund recycling outcomes. So that's my point of view.
Karen Moran?
I would support a ban that would be on 100%, that would be on any bags that are not 100% recyclable and styrofoam. I've got a background in nursing, and this little thing in the back of my head tells me about all the things that they have found from E. coli, salmonella, fecal coliform, and other bacteria that they find in bags when you bring home things like chicken, fish, and that sort of stuff. And if you don't use a plastic bag to keep that then, and you don't take home your reusable bag, and wash it and bleach it and make sure it's clean, that bacteria, if those bag is left in the car, will grow 10 times faster.
Rika?
I fully support it as well. I think anytime we reduce the use of plastic consumption, it's pretty much a win for everyone, not now, but our future generations as well. And if my 4-year-old can remember to do it in Issaquah, I think we can start indoctrinating ourselves to do it in Sammamish as well. Issaquah has seen a good transition to plastic bags, and I think we really should work for them and learn what worked, what didn't work, the struggles they had, and maybe even doing it better here in Sammamish.
Ratuja?
Plastic pollution is a great threat to our Puget Sound area, so I fully support single-use plastic bag bans and styrofoam ban in Sammamish. And as we've heard here in the City Council, local Sammamish businesses actually also support this plastic bag ban, and so does the Chamber of Commerce. So I would be in favor of banning plastic bags in Sammamish.
Okay, just so you know, I'm going home and washing my recyclable bags this evening. Ew.
That would be good.
You're right.
Next question, we're going to start with Melanie. And it's a little bit long here. How would you encourage local businesses and Sammamish residents to compost and recycle, and what incentives, education, and/or regulations would you enact to increase participation in these programs throughout the city?
Excellent question. Great one to start out with. I think that there are a lot of good examples of what other cities have done to bring people along in this effort, and I would try to look at what other places are doing, come up with some innovative approaches and ways that we can encourage more composting, encourage more recycling, and so on. I'm fully in favor of that. I think it's communication out to the residents of the community. It's putting programs in place that have been used elsewhere and have worked well, putting some best practices in place and so on. So I think that's a great program for us, and one that we should absolutely do, and I would look forward to working with the city staff to figure out how to do that. Thank you.
John?
This is an excellent example of what we call a P3, or a public-private partnership, Republic picks up our recyclables, and they take them to a point, and they will process them, clean them up, and then they'll go ahead and resell that as compost. I propose that in a partnership, we work with Republic so that they do their job, pick up the recyclables, and possibly deliver to some strategic spots in the city so our citizens can then pick up that compost and recycle in their gardens. As far as education, that can be delivered easily through the website and through means of education.
Pam?
Great, thank you. Education, I think, is the first place we start, and we've talked a little bit about using our children as examples. So our kids are excellent at composting and recycling, and I think that we do have schools that are doing a great job. My son attends STEM, and I believe that they are now a zero footprint school. Microsoft is an excellent example of trying to be a zero footprint company. So I think if we can take a page out of their books in terms of education, that's a great start. I will say that I don't think that forcing our population to purchase the composting and recycling from Republic has been very popular, especially in neighborhoods where they have yard services and now they're paying twice. But I do think that if we can help to educate the population on the benefits and also look into ways of making money, some of the recycling can actually be profitable. So I think we can look into those programs as well. Thank you.
Meenal?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, and there's really no need to reinvent a wheel because there's a lot of model communities that have been composting for years, and it's working really well. So let's look to them and see how they educated their communities and got people on board with composting. Schools, I believe, are already talking about it. I think I've had a conversation with my son about composting. He's up to speed on it. So if they're able to understand the process, I'm sure the rest of us can too. But I think it's a great idea, and I think we should start talking about that in our community. Thanks.
Karen, how?
30% of the waste in our garbage is food waste. And so there's a penalty for that. You're actually paying more in your garbage fees because we're not recycling the food compost into compost. But I'm guessing people don't know that. The Republic site actually is not great. They could have done a much better job with that. Now, the good part is they do have some multi-language aspects to it, which I think is also important. But what I would try to do, I think, to help encourage participation and education, why don't we have something with the HOAs? Why don't we have something where the HOAs compete and see who does the best job at recycling? For example, at the end of it all, we have a dumpster day, and whoever wins gets the dumpster day. And I can tell you that's hugely popular in my neighborhood.
Karen?
I actually researched this and went to the Environmental Protection Agency website and found that organic materials continue to be the largest source of the municipal solid waste, more than plastic, paper, metal, or glass. That's incredible to me. I think we need to work with many cities such as Seattle, San Francisco, Portland. They work with, such as they have for our garbage bins, but they also have compost bins, and those go out weekly, and they're picked up. It's part of that service. It's curbside service. We need to work in our schools and continue the education that's going on there. I think the kids can teach us a lot. I think that the farmers market would be a great place to educate people from the city, to educate people about composting and what can be done with it. And in the end, we need to remember that we need to save our environment, and we need to make sure that we're not filling up our landfills with things that we could take care of ourselves. So I think it is something that we should look at.
Rika?
We need to incentivize recycling and composting, including streamlining it so it actually becomes a way of life for us. Obviously, in my opinion, the easier you make it on someone to do, the more likely they are to actually do it. And I think that's really key. Education works. I know we start them young in the schools, and it really works. I remember the phrase, the 3 R's myself from school. We need to continue to work with our schools, but we also need to work with our local businesses. I think there's a major opportunity there to get them to encourage them to compost and to recycle.
Rituja?
Yep. So I know residents of Sammamish really like to recycle and compost, but almost 60% of our trash, we don't know if it can be recycled or it can be composted. So I think education goes a long way into helping people understand what can be composted or recycled. I think we also need to provide more incentives and education to our businesses, and not only to them, but also we see a lot of construction going on, so work with our developers as well to see what they can recycle and what they can compost as well. So I feel like we have a lot of new opportunities and also learning from different cities. I think Seattle makes a good example of how they encourage neighborhoods to compost, so I would like to see that in Sammamish as well.
Chris?
It starts with education. At work, very few my age or even younger than myself know where to put the recyclables, whether it be compost or waste. And so it really is about our youth now are getting the education. I had at the Kiwanis meeting, Hank Klein spoke. He did a terrific job, and those types of educational opportunities are awesome. He described to me about waste watchers at his school. Waste watchers. That is, kids literally monitor the bins and help other students where to put that different item. That repetition, that education, that precise guidance is critical, and it'll be emboldened in those kids as they age and then become leaders of the environment. So that's critical.
Next question, we're going to start with John. What is your priority for the city's land acquisition for open space, parks, and/or trail connections, and why?
This goes back to the theme about our living organism, which is our environment. One of the unique characteristics of Sammamish, and one of the attributes that really attract people here, is our forest preserve and our protected space, the Emerald Necklace. My priority would be that we continue develop the Emerald Necklace so that we're the only city that really has green space that's protected, that surrounds our eastern and northern borders of the city. That has to be a priority. It has to be something that we protect, and it would certainly be my priority on the board or in the city council.
Pam?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. I think there's two parts to this. One, I love the open spaces. I love the parks. I love recreation. I love to get outside and enjoy it, and I think most people here do. That's why we live in the Pacific Northwest, and that's why we live in Sammamish. But I think this question isn't about what my priority is for this. This is a question of what your priorities are for this. The PRO plan is being developed, right? The Parks, the Recreation, and Open Space plan is being developed. It's had a great deal of community input. And I think we on the council need to listen to what you in the community tell us that priority is. And that's our job. As representatives, we need to represent what you want and what you want us to prioritize in terms of how we spend your tax dollars and how we go about acquiring that land. So I would have input, but I would have to defer to what the community wants. I think that's important.
Meenal?
I think that as our community is, rapidly growing and changing, people are very concerned about, green spaces turning into houses. And so I think acquiring land is a perfect way for the city to kind of mitigate some of those concerns. As far as what these areas should be used for, open spaces, continuing to develop trails. There's networks in place, and I think that the trails just need to be kind of cleaned up and usable, user-friendly. I also think with so many more young people in our community, we need more sports fields and places where they can play and run and do everything young people should be doing. So I love the fact that our city is planning to acquire more land, because I think that it will mitigate some of the growing concerns about our city changing. So I'm so happy to know that that plan is in action. Thank you.
Karen Howe?
Based on recent surveys, it's pretty clear that residents have prioritized trails as passive use, something that's something residents for the most part really enjoy. So the other benefit to adding to our trail system is to help with actually some of our traffic issues. The more people that walk or bike are able to find another way, a different modality from getting from A to B is going to just help relieve pressure in different places. So I would prioritize trying to get connecting trails together, in particular into, for example, town center. Open spaces would be another priority. And in terms of fields, what I'd like to do is I'd like to see if we could speed up our schedule potential to get synthetic turf, frankly, in place, because that gives you the opportunity to use those fields more frequently because they don't wear down like turf does, and get some lights so that you can play at night.
Karen Moran.
Well, I want to also state that the PRO plan is currently underway by the Parks Board, and so I don't want to speak before the public has the opportunity to finish that entire process. There are a couple things that I think the public has spoke very clearly about, and one is the acquisition of more land, because they're losing our green spaces. So I believe that is very clear. And I think that we're going to need to look at that as we look at the current budget. I also think that trails, from what I've heard from walking around and door building, trails are also a big priority. Our current council has done a great job with the Emerald Necklace, and I think we need to support that. And then I also think we need to look at, as we're starting to look into the future and look at where we are going to have utility easements and things like that going through subdivisions, that might be a perfect place to put easements and to put trails on those easements and utilize that space. That way we'll have the trails in the subdivisions and we'll have the connections that are needed. Currently we have a lot of utility easements not being used that way.
Rika?
Well, I think we definitely need to work with our community to prioritize what our citizens want. I think that's always lost in the shuffle sometimes. We as a city can move forward on projects that sometimes the community doesn't support or think we need. But again, I think most of us really appreciate our trails and our open spaces here in Sammamish, and it's a big draw and a big reason why most of us are here. We should work together on helping create the Emerald Necklace and extend it and complete it. We also need to determine the costs of not only the acquisitions of these open spaces, but the maintenance of so many of these acquisitions that I think sometimes get lost in the shuffle.
Rituja?
Yep. So one of the things, like I said before, brought me to Sammamish was the open spaces and the trails. And I still am absolutely thrilled when I go for my morning run and I encounter a deer or a owl hooting. So my priority, and I know I've heard from many citizens as well, would be to preserve our wildlife, to preserve those wildlife corridors. Also, I would really want to see some access to the water. Right now we live near Lake Sammamish, but citizens of Sammamish don't have too much access to the water other than Sammamish Landing. And that is what I've heard from people as well, that they would love to have some more access to the beaches of Lake Sammamish. So those would be some things that I would like to consider.
Chris?
I agree with Manny that we don't want to get in front of the PRO plan. It's very critical to get the comprehensive citizen input. As far as land acquisition is concerned, I'd like to see passive and preservation use, because it's a win-win. Lower maintenance costs for the long run. It also preserves our canopy and other environmental benefits.
Melanie?
Thank you. I think one of the most important things that we need to do is decide what we want our city to be. That's the PRO plan is going to be doing that and getting your input. So I think that that's really important. What do we want Sammamish to be in the future? And I found working with clients that reaching common goals is the only way to achieve success. So if we can reach a common understanding and common goals about what we want the city to look like, then we can put plans, financial and otherwise, in place to achieve those goals. I think connectivity is a big issue, and I also like the idea of the Emerald Necklace, and I would fully support furthering that as well. Thank you.
Next question, we're going to start with Pam. Do you support the creation of aesthetic design standards for new developments in Sammamish? Why or why not?
Okay, this is a good one. So yes, I do, but I caveat that in that I think it needs to be very light-handed. I like the idea of having some design standards around our environmental attributes, because I think that will be helpful. But I think we need to be really careful about the city council imposing their own sense of style or design onto all of our citizens. And so I think there's a delicate balance. We want to make sure that we have a certain character for our city, but we all have been probably in those neighborhoods where the HOAs might be just a little bit too controlling. So I would support it to a certain degree, but it would have to be very light-handed.
Meenal?
I would also support it to a certain degree, within reason. I think that the thing that we love about Sammamish is that, it's so green and beautiful, and having some design standards to kind of maintain that, I think is good. But as long as it's not overbearing on people's, personal opinions on how they want their homes to look. But just promoting some standards like that in a very nice way, I think would be great for the city. Thanks.
Karen Howe?
I used to work for Adobe, so aesthetics is certainly part of my DNA, but I would struggle with trying to come up with some kind of design standard because I know that design is subjective. So what I find is that the market will actually help dictate to a large extent what's successful or not successful in terms of design. So I would back away probably from a particular design standard because I believe it'd be difficult to enforce and impossible to institute.
Karen?
Well, I agree from the standpoint that aesthetic design, the problem is that's everybody's personal choice. So it's a little bit hard to impose that on somebody else. But I would like to see, as doorbelling, I'm hearing from a lot of people that they think some of the new things going in are unsightly, if not just plain ugly. So what I'd like to see is to see a committee put together and maybe have a builder who can bring aesthetic sort of stuff and have some, some people from the public on there, and just so you have a full range of people who could come up with maybe some basics.
Rika?
I do think we need some standards, but again, general standards. I think we need to go back to what is our vision of our city? What do we want our city to look like in 5 years and 10 years? Do we want them to be all new developments with cookie cutter houses that everyone gets lost in because all the houses look the same? Or do we want something different? We need a vision and a plan for our city. And I think design and art, and it's very subjective, and whether or not we can do that as a city council, I think is something that we would need to look at further.
Ratuja?
Sammamish is a young city, and it's really a collection of different neighborhoods. And now that we have incorporated some other areas into the city, it is, a collection of neighborhoods. So I would actually encourage us to have a design or aesthetic sort of committee which could help us build Sammamish into a community, something that will all make us more people-oriented, and then also for new developments to be more aesthetically pleasing. As everybody said, everybody has different ideas of aesthetics, so it would be something that could, we could focus on some of the other goals, like making it more walkable or people-oriented or more diverse. But I would definitely support having a committee.
Chris?
Regulation alone does not get the desired results all the time, and especially true. We have the strongest tree policy in the area. Is that generating the results? Will it generate results? No. There has to be some subjective component. A design standard not levied by the city council is my recommendation. I recommend as part of the permitting process there is some subjective design component in the developer's application. And like HOA approving the color of the paint of your house, does it fit in with the community? And then if the answer is yes, then they can move on with their development. I think that's the way it needs to be worked, not a bunch of people sitting here on the counter trying to figure out what people want.
Melanie?
I probably would not be in favor of some kind of design standard. I think it's too subjective, and we need to, maintain the beauty of our neighborhoods. But I know I had to go through 11 shades of yellow to get Hampton Woods to agree to let me paint my house. So I'm not sure that I would want to have some strict rules around that. What I would like to see is different kinds of housing, though. So not just huge houses on small lots, but let's look at some different kinds of housing, small houses or townhouses, things like that. Just a mix of the housing types versus a strict standard about how they should look.
John?
This is not a decision for the City Council. In fact, this could be a very exciting project for all the citizens to help us define what is our community characteristics. Do aesthetics come into it? Certainly. But it's so subjective, it would be very difficult to enforce. Secondly, though, I believe that we can once again partner with developers and tell them what is a Northwest style or what the citizens want to see and what is acceptable. One thing City Council can do, though, is they can put into place rules for developments, whether it's a town center or residential sites.
Okay, now we have some time for questions from the audience. So for those of you who have questions that weren't covered, that we didn't cover with ours, I'm going to ask you to come up to the podium and ask the candidates, and we'll get to as many people as we can. And again, candidates, you'll each have 1 minute to answer questions from the audience.
I would like to hear from each of our candidates what their position is on the 42nd Street barricade and their position on combining the 2 water districts we have in Sammamish.
And let's begin with Karen Howe.
Okay, let's talk about the water districts first. At this point, this has actually not been something that constituents or residents have ever brought up to me as a concern for them to combine them. So when they haven't, because you know why? It's because they care about traffic and growth and trees. And so it may be something that would be further down on their priority list, but they actually don't bring it up. Right now, it's working well. Now, I do know that Bellevue and Issaquah had an agreement where they actually just traded off who had control over what water district. You can actually make money off of this. It's a utility, but I don't know that we have expertise internally to handle a utility for the city. So I would be cautious about something like that. It's not something I'm convinced that we need to move forward on right now. And what was your other question? It was?
The 42nd Street barricade.
Okay. So it's funny you should mention that. I'm actually meeting with somebody on Thursday night.
Thank you.
Just say yes or no.
Karen Moran.
Okay, I'm going to hit the barricade first because that's the simple one. The answer is no. It is just not safe. The roads around it aren't safe. It wouldn't be safe for anybody to travel on. As far as the water districts go, no. Again, it is not something that I have heard brought up from a couple of people and that have been scared because of some of the things the city has done in the past, that their water districts in some way would be put together or in some way taken over. I would be against any of those. The North End has got a different set of water. It's on a different well, wins annual awards for its purity of its water. The Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District has been around for 70 years. They know how to run a utility when our city has not had any utility in its background. So I would not be for anybody taking over a water district, anybody combining water districts, and I'd be also against the barricade.
Thank you. I am also against the barricade. I agree with Karen. I think it's just not safe for people to travel on right now. And, you know, I think anyone who visits the area can see that with their own eyes. As far as combining the 2 water districts, I think they are such different districts that I think their issues and their ups and downs and their quality is so different that I don't see the need for it.
Ratuja?
So I have friends living on both sides of the 42nd Street barricades. I've heard from both of them. I think each barricade in this city presents its own unique issues, and they need to be dealt with differently, taking into consideration the impact to the environment, the existing road condition, the safety of our citizens, and traffic volumes as well. So before I decide completely on which way to go, I would like to study the issue more. And regarding the water districts, I think I've talked to the managing directors of both the water districts, and I feel right now that is something that's done quite well by the individual water districts, and that the city probably does not need to assume that responsibility.
Chris?
On the 42nd, again, that's a very, very issue that has 2 points of view. One is those that are within the barricade, site safety and the calming of traffic and the safety of their children. Those outside are advocating, why do they get to break the connecting streets for the rest of us? Why do we don't get special treatment? So it's equality of the connectors in the community. So again, I need to really, really study that issue. I'm going to meet a gentleman on that subject and learn more about that. But I think it really is, I'm really kind of on the margin on that right now, trying to study it further. As far as the water, again, Northern has pure award-winning water. I don't think there's any need for them or want for them to combine water districts right now, and both are working well. And so we have other problems like traffic, preserving our environment, and growth, and et cetera. So I think our focus needs to be on the priorities right now. Don't work on things that are not broken yet.
Melanie?
Thank you. I would agree on the water districts. It's not a concern that I heard at all. I would want to know what the value would be to the residents of Sammamish. Is this something that we can take on as a city? And is this really what we want to spend our money on? On the 42nd Street barricade, I've canvassed in that area and I've heard the pros and cons. At this point, am on the fence as well. No pun intended there, excuse me. But in any case, what I do wish we could do is make the decision and move on without leaving it to fester for a long time. Thank you.
John?
For the city to acquire the water districts, this is really a risk-reward problem to study. And it would be directed by the citizens. What are the benefits to the citizens if we were to do something like this? Is it financially feasible? And like a business, does it have a return on investment for the citizens? So that would be my position on the water districts. The 42nd barricade, forgive me, I'd have to study that and learn more about it before I could voice my opinion on that. But certainly safety is a priority.
Pam?
All right, am I the only one? Is 42nd Street the one in Timberline? I'm sorry.
Timberline and Waterbrook, yes.
Okay, thank you. So that one is a challenge because I walked through that several times. I am big on connectivity. I think connectivity is going to be key to helping solve some of our traffic problems, but I do agree that safety first. And this one isn't just about being safe for our children, but this one is about the slope and making sure that we could, if we did open it, we'd have to make sure we could be absolutely certain that we could control the speed of traffic, but I don't believe that that one is safe at this time. In terms of our water district, they're well run. Our city staff is already stretched beyond their capacity, and we're about to have 4 new council members on our council, which would be a majority of the council members. Now is not the time to take on something so large. So if we wanted to look at it, I think that's fine, but I think that is definitely something we have to look at down the road once we get, a majority of new council members in place.
Thank you so much.
Meenal?
With the water districts, I feel like if it's not broken, let's not fix it right now. We can maybe plan for it in the future, reevaluate, reassess, and talk about that in the future, but not now. With the 42nd barricade, public safety first. So while I'd love to hear both sides of, what the pros and cons of that plan are, if public safety is compromised, I would say no.
Okay, next question.
Do I just come up, or is there a line?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
Since I know only the 3 of the seats are represented here because the 1 seat doesn't have a primary, I'm assuming that's why they're not here.
Correct. Can you speak up, please?
I'm sorry. Only 3 of the seats are represented here. I'm assuming it's because the 4th seat doesn't have a primary.
Correct.
So with more than half the council about to be new, traffic is one of the hottest issues. It's not brand new, but it's obviously blossoming out of control now. I'd just like to hear from each of you, if you are aware, I don't really want you to bash the prior council, but I'd like to hear your thoughts if you are aware about why it has not been addressed for so long, and why do you 3 and the 4th in absentia think you can solve that problem now if you're inheriting such a mess? Please. Thank you.
Let's start with Karen Moran.
Well, yes, we are in getting a mess. But there's a couple of things we can look at. We can look at our level of service, see where it's at. That has changed from what was written in the original comp plan to what is done now. We can look at segment averaging. We can look at AM, PM. We need to figure out where the cars are, where the clogs are, and what the time is of the clogs. There's a couple of things we can do with the timing of the lights. But mostly we need to work with the city of Issaquah. We need to work with Redmond, because if we don't work with them, we are going to continue to be clogged. Because we could put in 5 lanes throughout this entire city. But guess what? If we can't work with the surrounding cities, we're not going to get anywhere. So the other issue that comes with that is going to be the money that is going to be needed to pay for those roads. There's a couple of things that we can do. We can take bonds out, which right now the cost that is going up annually, it is going up 6 to 8% annually for roads to be built. So every year, count on 6% or 8% to go up. When a bond right now is 3%. So it's
time. Thank you. Rika?
You know, I think right now we're clearly, obviously looking at unprecedented growth. We've looked at the growing areas around us, our neighboring cities. It's astronomical. Well, the link that I think previous councils have missed is working with our neighboring cities, Redmond and Issaquah. We could have perfect roads here in Sammamish, but we're still going to hit the choke points in Issaquah and Redmond. There's no getting around it. And to me, I think that's essential to work closely with Issaquah and Redmond. I'm not talking about the regional transportation, getting cities on the east side all together. I'm talking about let's have a working group with Issaquah and Redmond. Let's meet with them every couple weeks, every month, and make sure that we're on target and trying to solve this issue together, because we can't fix it alone, unfortunately.
Ratuja?
Yeah. As you rightly said, you know, traffic has been an issue in the city since it's been incorporated, or even before that, so it's nothing new. I think priorities of our community, you know, they should be reflected in what we discuss. So right now, if traffic is a big concern to our citizens, you know, that is what the council should be trying to solve. And I think information, being very transparent with our information, I think for the council to ask hard questions of the staff when, you know, we don't understand something or something just doesn't seem clear, I think asking those questions right off the bat instead of waiting for a long time, I think that will help us, you know, be more transparent with people as well to say where we stand at with the traffic. And again, working with our regional partners, I think that is very important to, you know, alleviate some of our traffic issues.
Chris?
We are in the middle of the adjacent communities, and until we are able to work with our community partners, Issaquah, Redmond, and others in the region, we cannot solve the traffic problem. We can't relieve the traffic problem. We can't have enough buses unless we can get commute time down for the people that try to get out of this plateau to work. So it's all about regional cooperation and real solutions, real goals, not think tank. We have too much discussion, not enough action, and we got to really figure out a way to pool our priorities with the other communities and come up with a solution.
Melanie?
Thank you. One of the things that the 4 new council members will be elected on is fixing traffic. So I think that the residents of Sammamish would be a little upset if that wasn't one of our first priorities, if you voted us in to fix it. So first of all, I think we need to make that a top priority, however the council looks coming in. We need to make it a top priority. How would we change what's happened in the past? Well, I think that we need to engage the community more. I think that there needs to be more transparency with residents of Sammamish about the decisions the council makes and about the pros and cons of different approaches. So I think communication is going to be key. And then finally, I agree with the others up here that we need to engage with Redmond, Issaquah, and Falls City, others, and work with them to figure out how we're going to resolve this. So yeah, I think it's kind of a 3-pronged approach there. Thanks.
John?
As to the current council, I have no fault with them. They're provided the information, and they're trying to deal with the information the best they can. When it comes to a problem like this, or an issue such as this, or a challenge, this goes back to my introduction. This is where we need full-time attention by a city council to really help solve this so that the quality of life and the levels of service for our citizens is not deteriorated. So I would propose that we work lock in step with our city neighbors and advocate for Sammamish, because that's really the only way we're going to solve this problem, is through a collaborative effort with Redmond and Issaquah.
Okay, I think our prior councils have been very cautious fiscally. I think they've been very fiscally conservative. We're in very good shape right now financially because of that. But I think sometimes when you don't look ahead and invest, that you miss opportunities. And so I think that right now is the time when we have to invest in our community. And it's not about spending money or being careless. It's about making a good investment. And yes, money is cheap right now. And so I do believe that now might be the right time to take out a bond and to invest in our infrastructure and fix some of these traffic problems before they get even worse and we come to complete gridlock. And of course, traffic is a regional problem. Unfortunately, here in the Pacific Northwest, we like to vote sometimes 15 or 16 times on traffic solutions. And so we do need to stop talking about it and start taking some action. So again, we have to go back to roads, buses, and technology and new solutions.
Meenal?
I think traffic just, naturally goes hand in hand with growth. So I don't think that there was any way to avoid congestion. And it's a regional issue. It's not just Sammamish. It's, our neighbors on both sides and front and back. So yes, let's definitely work with folks in Issaquah, folks in Redmond, Fall City, and really come up with some collaborative plans on how we're going to alleviate congestion and traffic, because I don't think it's just going to be it's not going to be an easy solution. We need to talk about it, discuss, and then plan accordingly. And also, let's just see our road improvement projects through. Let's see our trail projects, see them through, and make our city more walker-friendly. And I think all of these collectively will alleviate some of the traffic and congestion that we're all feeling discomfort about. Thanks.
Karen?
So level of service is set by each jurisdiction. And so what we'd want is for each of the adjacent jurisdictions, like Issaquah and Redmond, to have similar levels of service requirements that we do. And that provides that synergy, so that allows us to work together much better. Now, I also think that there are some things that we could do potentially now just to try, because patience is not a virtue here. I think we could try lowering the speed limit and see if it works. There's studies out that we didn't pay for, that Helsinki did, that shows that that could work. What if there are other, like 10 other studies that someone else paid for, already has published, and said, well, why don't we just try it? You don't have to do it forever. You can roll it back. It's the same idea for traffic calming. Put out sandbags and some shrubs and try it for 2 weeks. Does it work or not? The data's right there, and you can make a go-forward decision and not wait around for a study.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the audience?
I'd like to ask one.
Sure.
Oh, no, okay, all right.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Maybe it'll be tomorrow.
Good evening, candidates. Thanks for coming tonight to answer our questions. My name is Ken Gamblin, and I live in the northern part of Sammamish, which is kind of personified with some bigger, older trees and a much more wooded look. It seems to me that most of the new, if not all of the new housing that we see going in is kind of the strip and flatten and cram model, rather than preserving a wooded look that Sammamish, for me anyway, is kind of known for. I was wondering if you have any thoughts on how we might preserve, as we go forward, building out the rest of Sammamish, maybe building out the R1s and R4s, how we keep this wooded look that we all seem to like. It seems that a lot of our aesthetic questions are not so much how the developments look, but how bare they are and stripped they are, and how different they look from the wooded lot that was there before. Thank you.
Let's start with Rika.
And I think it's a wonderful point, and it's a wonderful question. And I know pretty much everyone in this room has seen the developments that I think have gone wrong, where they have cut down the old growths and instead have replaced them with, trees this big, and we've called it good as a city. We need to work to preserve our wooded areas. We need to work with our developers I think we've been missing that link of actually working with developers and making sure that they aren't cutting down old growths. You can build houses around old growths, and it actually looks a lot nicer. We've seen it done. It's happened before. And I think one thing that we forget as a city is we can pick and choose what developments go into our city. You know, that, again, going back to a vision of what do we want Sammamish to look like 5 years or 10 years from now. We need to be a little bit more choosy as to what developments are coming into our city.
Time. Ratuja?
I think one thing that we all should also remember is there have been some developments that have happened in Sammamish which were actually clear-cut many, many years ago, but now they look beautiful and they look like they have lots of trees. I think it's important to educate our developers and homeowners on old-growth trees and why they're important and how, you know, we shouldn't have them just one tree remaining, but having a cluster. Why is it that important? Why is it important to our wildlife? Why is it important to our ecology? And we should encourage them to build around those houses. And I know it's going to be a challenge, but I think education and will go a long way. I think the other thing that also needs to happen in Sammamish is enforcement of our existing development codes, and then also modernizing the development codes that have gone, you know, that are not concurrent with the development that's happening right now.
Chris?
I'm going to borrow some of my earlier answers on this. Developers are in the business to make money as much as we hate to admit it. So we got to find a way that they can coexist, because they're a component of the way we are today. There's many beautiful developments today that are a result of good developers. How do we get them on our team, and how do we preserve our tree canopy and don't erode our environment? I talked about transfer development rights. For example, if you have trees in one area of the development, authorize in trade an upzone. An upzone allows the developer to put development where it belongs, and it preserves the trees and the environment. So we got to be creative. We got to work with our developers, and also give them incentives to help with that cause. And aesthetic type of development also can come into play. Working with our developers, we'll find a lot of positive results from them in our community.
Melanie?
Thank you. Well, first I go back to deciding what we want Sammamish to look like in the next, 5-10 years. So that's first to me, is we need to agree as a community of what we want it to look like. We do need to enforce the codes and policies that are in place today. And finally, we need to have more substantial conversations between the community and the developers. I know I, like many people in Sammamish, were taken by surprise when Highcroft, when they started to mow that down, and the Jarvis property, that took me by surprise, and I think people were very upset about that. So I think we need to have increased communication with the developers so that we understand what's happening and we can get our questions answered before the trees start coming down. Thanks.
John?
Thank you for that question. This is another good example of City Council leading and having the city lead. We can set the rules and regulations as to how developments occur within our city. And so most developers are from outside of Sammamish. They may not appreciate the city character that we have. So I would propose that City Council take a full lead on this and really protect what we have, because it's a valuable asset. Thank you for that question.
Pam?
Yeah, I would look to our urban forestry plan that we developed to really help to inform and even use for enforcement on this. I don't know how many of you are aware how important that tree canopy is in terms of cleaning our air, absorbing carbon, right, to reduce greenhouse gases, filtering our water, preventing erosion, helping us manage stormwater runoff. The trees are critical. And so I think we need that urban forestry study, and we need to incorporate that into our building codes, and maybe this is where we have an aesthetic building code. Maybe this, I don't know what category we'd put it into, but I definitely think we need to make sure that we are adjusting that code, or our tree retention policy for the old growth, and we need to make sure, again, that when we replant that they are appropriate trees, so we're not just taking them down in another 10 or 15 years.
Meenal?
I'd like to also look at how things were historically zoned and sort of see if they still make sense. So, just like our environment, our community is changing. So does it really make sense to develop certain pockets as densely as they're being developed now, because I know a lot of folks are voicing concerns about wildlife corridors being affected, their land, they're just worried that things are going to change too quickly. So let's reevaluate how things were zoned and see if they still make sense. Also, let's just generally set a strategic plan on what we want our community to look like, not just 5 or 10 years down the road, but 20 years down the road. We're growing, and that's not going to stop. People love the city. They want to come live here. So let's come up with a plan to keep our community green and also inviting. Thanks.
Karen, how?
I have to say what confuses me is why buffer trees aren't kept, because I believe that is actually part of our ordinances. So that is something that I would come down hard on for compliance, in addition to the tree retention policies that we have in place now. The battle we're fighting is gray versus green. We're trying to keep more of the green and have gray in an appropriate place. So that gray would be like construction, for example, or like town center. What I would like to do is actually work on the ordinance that talks about how we work with our developers. And so right now, all they have to do is send a notice out to the neighborhood saying, we're going to do this development, come to a meeting. You show up, they listen, and they don't have to respond. I'd like to reorganize that so they actually have to respond to your specific concerns about the development as it goes into play, before it goes into place and before it's permitted. When you do something like that,
Thank you. Karen Moran.
I think the job falls on the city. I think that I'm sad to say that the county may have done a better job in some of our older neighborhoods, such as Timberline, Tree Farm, Sahali, Montage, where you saw the clusters, you saw the tree buffers between the road and the housing. You didn't know what was going in back there. It could have been, some of these big row houses, but they were required to keep a buffer of large trees. And that is, I think, what we're all missing. And I think that that is something that needs to come from the comp plan. It needs to come from the city. I agree that we need to do something different with the meetings that we have between the developers and the citizens, but frankly, the leadership needs to come down from the city on this. And I would like to see more done as our old developments were done, where you see Heritage Hills, Sahali, and just some of the older developments where you see the high buffers, you see the bigger clusters of trees, and they take into account some of these old native trees, and they work around them.
Okay, looks like
Thank you.
We have enough time for one more question from the audience. Also, feel free to write a letter to the editor as well, and we'll publish it.
Hi, my name is Zainab, and I'm part of that millennial generation that moved out here because I wanted my 2 girls to have an awesome, quality of life. We have a big backyard. We have all these really great amenities that other cities don't have. And one of the things that really drew us to this area was the increased diversity. And I wanted to ask you all what your plan was for inclusion. Because diversity is great, but alone, it doesn't really do much. We have to have a plan to actually include folks in the community. And so what is your plan, if at all, to become more inclusive? Thank you.
Let's start with Rituja.
Excellent question. Thank you, Zainab. I think having a government that represents the community, I think is a first step that we all need to acknowledge. I think because that also invites other people to open up. I have talked to actually some of the city staff about having a citizen academy, which they have also promoted, which would be to educate our citizens in the services that the city can do for them, on the different ways and different departments work. And I would really be a big proponent of that as well, to educate our citizens on how they can participate more in our community. When I was on the PTSA, we had this festival, a day which would be called Festival of Cultures, where people from all different countries came together with a little food sample and artifacts about their country and a little information. And at Challenger Elementary, where my kids went, we had kids from 80 countries. So I would like to have that here as well.
Chris?
We know we're successful in diversity when diversity is the intermix of the entire Sammamish community. My wife is Chinese, and many of people that she associates with stay within the Chinese community, and they don't feel comfortable reaching out to the rest of the community, and they feel there's a loss of community. We need to absolutely both do the cultural specific events and get not just those within that culture, those outside of that culture to get involved and understand other people. And then vice versa, have overall community events that draw all of us together. We got to get more integration across the board and get all of us living into one Sammamish community.
Melanie?
Thank you. First of all, the City Council needs to reflect the reality of who we are as a community now. We're very diverse now, and the City Council needs to reflect that so that the citizens can see that they have a voice at the table. The second is that we do need to do more outreach, shared life experiences, bring the different groups together. My boys are Cambodian and Chinese, and I would love to have them talk about their culture with other people in the community. So I am all for additional events, cross-cultural exchanges and discussions, meeting at mosques and churches and so on. I think that's a critical component to making us who we are going forward.
John?
Thank you for your question, and I identify with it because I'm an immigrant myself, and I believe strongly in an open community, and we have to be inclusive of all people because it makes us stronger today as a society. So some of the things that the city could do would be, as an example, maybe a cultural day, maybe different examples of the different diversity that make up our city, because we have so many people coming into our city today from all parts of the world, and the underlying point here is that we are stronger today because of you.
I'm from North Carolina. Just throwing it out there.
And you're welcome.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think making sure, you know, diversity and inclusion always works better. We always make better decisions when everyone's included. And I think events would be great, but we find that, you know, people are busy and they can't always make it to events. So I think we need something a little more pointed and targeted, right? I think we really do need to reach out to the different community organizations and make it a pointed invitation to come and join in, whether it be different kinds of meetings on different topics. But I really think it has to be much more pointed and direct and really pull people in. The other thing I'll throw out to the room is that the best way to get more inclusion is if this is what every city council meeting looked like.
Mino?
We need you.
Well, one of the ways that I hope to make this community more inclusive is running for city council. So I hope to, you know, include those conversations, those important conversations. Our city is 30% people of color. We have religions across the board. We have different faith groups. We have all these communities, and I hope that I can help facilitate conversations and get people kind of in the same room and sharing their experiences. Also, we have consultants telling us how to do different things around the city, whether it's financially or the planning or the environment. I don't see any reason we can't have a consultant come in here and do a little diversity training, getting the city staff, city council, and then hopefully that'll trickle into the community and get more people engaged with how our city is run and have people feel respected and included. Thank you.
Karen?
The Sammamish Arts Commission actually is a pretty interesting and diverse group. And what's pretty cool about that is that they have some wonderful ideas for outreach. And what comes to mind is that, you know, an event is where you show up and you say, get off my blanket. So it's not really an opportunity to get together as much, but if you're doing art together, if you're experiencing art together, you're talking to somebody now. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? I like that color. I don't like that. Whatever it is, it's a way to connect on frankly, a deeper level. And so I would encourage us to take a look at what could arts provide to us, what that would allow us to engage and really talk to each other. The other thing that I see in our communities is I see people walking, but I only see certain people walking. I think everybody should be out walking. So I wonder, is there a way that instead of a walking school bus, we can do the after walk community walk thing where everybody in the community gets out there and comes together?
Karen?
Well, first of all, I'm a big believer in celebrations because I think if people come out to something happy, it brings people together. So I think diversity is something that we should be celebrating. I grew up in the Midwest, and one of the things that we did in the Milwaukee area was they always had different festivals for the different cultures, different religions. It was a place where you could go and you had a great time. You got to learn more about the different things and just the foods that they have to, tell me a little bit about your religion, to, the clothes that you wear, to whatever. And I think if we put it in a happy setting and it's there to have fun, you learn a lot of things. So I would be more lean toward that.
Rika?
Thank you, and a great question. I've actually had the lucky privilege of serving at the State Department and traveling the world as a diplomat, so I really appreciate your question. I think as a city, we really need to set an example. I think it's great. There's no downside to being inclusive to everybody. Why aren't we doing more cultural events? We should be doing more cultural events. We have a fantastic farmers market every Wednesday. Why not do a booth, a cultural booth? We can rotate weekly on different cultures to actually spotlight. I think that would be wonderful, and I think so many people would appreciate it. We've got great citizen groups here in Sammamish working on drawing attention to diversity. For example, Platopians for Peace just did a Syrian dinner experience last week. I think we can do more of these kind of events and get more city involvement in these events to highlight our diversity.
Thank you. Okay, it's time for our 30-second closing statements. Candidates, if you could magically seat yourself at every kitchen and dining room table in the city of Sammamish, what would you say to convince each voter that you are the best person for the job of representing us on the council? Let's start with Karen Moran.
I hate girls first. I would tell you that what sets me apart from other candidates is my history, my knowledge, and most of all, my experience. All the committees and things that I've sat on and all the things that I've learned over time. I don't think there's anything that beats experience. And the learning curve is going to be huge for many people, and it isn't going to be that huge for me. So I believe, again, experience matters, and I hope that if you have a question or something, please seek me out. I'd love to talk to you.
Karen Howe.
Well, I know we're going through change, and I do think the best way to manage change right now is to communicate. So the first thing that I would do is a great deal more two-way communication and outreach to bring everybody possible into the conversation. My concern is, you guys are here. This is awesome. How do we capture this energy and this interest level and maintain it and keep it going forward? The way that we move together is through a shared vision, because that is so powerful. What I'm good at is helping people articulate that vision, pull it together, and then act on it. What we need are pragmatic, actionable solutions now.
Meenal?
So I don't claim to be an expert by any means, but I'm a good listener. I'm able to research and review issues in a diligent manner and engage with individuals from all walks of life. I'm committed to serving our citizens and really leveraging our rich diversity in sound policy making. If elected, I'd love to work collaboratively with co-counsel and really achieve the goals that are in the best interest of our entire community. Thank you.
Pam?
Thanks. Look, I'll be inclusive, I'll be collaborative, and I'll be a really good steward of all of our resources, whether that be our trees, our finances, whatever they are. And I think that's what we need from council. We need that leadership. We need a council, too, that's going to rely on the expertise of their staff, right? Our problems are complex, and we need people who are experts in every one of those fields. Anyone who tells you they're an expert in all this is probably not. But thank you.
John?
Our Sammamish character and community reflects the structure, physical, and the human characteristics the citizens of our community. Our City Council holds a significant responsibility of listening to you as citizens and providing solutions to your concerns and holding the city staff accountable to you, our citizens. The primary purpose of our City Council and City Hall is to provide a positive impact on the quality of your life.
Time. Melanie?
Thank you. What I've observed since starting this campaign is that what is most needed on the City Council are people who are critical thinkers, who can listen to all the stakeholders, quickly synthesize new information from staff, and make thoughtful, reasoned decisions for all residents. I do this every single day with my clients, and my promise to you is that I will collaborate with my fellow council members to make this city a great place for all of us to live. Thank you very much.
Chris?
I'm your sanity check to make sure we make the right investments going forward. We are at a critical turning point of sustainment mode, trying to update our infrastructure. We have external tax pressures, so the stomach for Sammamish citizens to increase taxes is very low despite all these challenges. The only way we're going to meet these challenges, which we will meet those challenges, is very careful prioritization and selections of high impact investments that help our infrastructure, traffic, and environment.
Rituja?
So this has been a great evening, and thank you all for being patient and listening to us. If there are just two things that I would like you to remember about me as you go home today is, first of all, that I've been a dedicated community volunteer for the past 15 years in Sammamish, and that I will fight and prioritize our quality of life for everyone, for now and for future generations. And secondly, that I will ensure there is transparency at all levels and that all voices are heard. Thank you all for your support, and I look forward to earning your vote.
Rika?
Thank you. It's been an honor to share the stage tonight with all of our wonderful candidates. I believe what sets me apart is my experience bringing people together to solve tough problems. As a diplomat, attorney for the State Department, as a trained mediator, as a policy advisor in the U.S. Senate, I get it. One thing I understand too well is that politics of partisanship, special interests, that's stuff for the other Washington. We really need to focus on what's best for our city here in Sammamish, and I promise you that I will do that. We need to bring our community together around a shared vision for Sammamish. Thank you.
Well, this has been the fastest 2 hours I've had in a long time. I'd like to, first of all, I'd like to thank my editor, Carrie Rodriguez, and my reporter staff, Megan Campbell and Nicole Jennings. And I want to mostly from my heart thank all of you for being here, for your passion, your interest, your dedication, and your focus to expressing the importance of this almost sacred moment of change and moving forward. And I'm grateful that you're all here, and I'm grateful for the candidates. So we hope this forum helped our candidates communicate what skill sets they bring to the table, so that when you all are filling out your ballots by August 1, you'll make a good, educated decision as to how you think these amazing individuals will do in representing and serving the city of Sammamish and you. And again, please help me thank the candidates for their participation in this forum and for also stepping up and offering themselves to serve our community. Thank you. Have a good evening, everybody, and thank you again for coming.
Thank you.